inputs, buttons, and icons. In this video, we are going to learn how we can create text input fields in our Ionic applications, and we'll also learn how we can create and style different types of buttons in Ionic. And towards the end of this video, we'll also learn how we can use icons in Ionic. So here we are back in Visual Studio Code, and the first thing I'll do is get rid of all the content within the Ion content component. So I'll delete all this code that I have within the Ion content component. And now if I save, you can see that the content on the page in our application is gone. So all the content of the page inside our application goes inside our Ion content. Everything above the Ion content should be included in your header bar, and everything below Ion content should be included in your footer bar. So let's go ahead and learn how we can use input fields inside our Ionic application. To create an input field, all you have to do is use the component called Ion input, and this creates an input field on your page. If I save the application right now, you cannot see anything on the page, but we have an input field right here on the page. And here I can just go ahead and type in the input. There are a few attributes that you can define for this component. Just like a regular HTML input element, this component also takes in the type as a parameter, and the type can either be text, numbers, telephone, email, etc. So if I just go ahead and type in text, it will accept textual input. We can also pass in a placeholder value, and now the text field becomes visible. Now that we have an input field in place, let's create a button below this input field. So inside my Ion content, I am going to create a button, and to create a button, all you need to do is use the component called Ion button. Within the tags, you should pass in the text that you want to be displayed on your button. And as I save, you can see that I get a simple button. The text on the button says "click me", and that's because the text between the tags is "click me". The button component also takes in a number of inputs. If you guess the first input right, it's color. Using the color attribute, you can specify the color of your button. The default color of buttons is primary, which is why we have the blue button. You can also specify different colors, like the danger color will change the color of the button to red. Now we have a red button. Apart from the color attribute, the button accepts 4 different parameters or inputs. The first one is expand, and the value of expand can either be full or block. If you pass in block, you will get a full width button, but the corners of the button will be rounded. So you can see that I get a full width button, but the corners are still rounded. However, if I pass in full, I get a full width button and the corners are square. So either way, the button takes up all the available horizontal space, but the corners are different for full and block buttons. Another attribute that you can pass in to the Ion button component is shape, and the shape input only accepts one value, which is round. And this gives you a button with more rounded corners. So now you can see that the button is completely rounded in shape. The third parameter that you can pass in to a button is fill, and the fill parameter takes in 3 different values. And the value that you can pass in to the fill input can either be solid, which is the default value, it can be outline, or it can be clear. So if you pass in solid, you can see that nothing changes. However, if you pass in outline, you will only get to see the outline of the button. The fill in the button is gone. If you pass in clear, only the text of the button is visible. Neither the outline nor the fill are visible in this case. So those are the 3 values that you can pass in to the fill property. And the last input that the Ion button component takes in is size. The default size is called as default, which will not change the size of the button. However, if you pass in small, you will get a small sized button. This button will be smaller than the default button. And if you pass in large, you'll get a larger button. This button is larger than the default button. So those are the ways you can customize your buttons. You can use all these attributes together and make unique combinations to achieve the button that you want in your application. For example, if you want a full width rounded button that has no fill, all you have to do is just combine the shape attribute, the expand attribute, and the fill attribute. So for shape, I have passed in round because I want to have rounded corners. For expand, I have passed in block, which will give me a full width button. And for fill, I have passed in outline, which will give me a button with only the outline. And I got what I wanted. So this is how you can create different types of buttons in your application. In addition to having simple text in your button, you can also have icons, and using icons inside your buttons is easier than you think. All you have to do is use the Ion icon component and pass in the name of the icon. Let's look at an example. So on this very first button, just before the text click me inside the Ion button component, I'm going to create another component called Ion icon and give it a name. I'm going to type in home as the name of the icon, and that's it. As I save, you can see that I get a home icon on my button. The icon looks okay, but there should be slight space between the icon and the text. It doesn't look very nice. And to fix that, the icon component takes in an attribute called slot, and the value of slot can be start if you want to have the icon to the left of your text, or it can be end, which will move the icon to the right of your text. If you just want to have a button that has no text but only an icon, in that case, you should pass the value icon only to the slot parameter. Let's learn how we can create an icon only button. So I'm going to create a simple button. I'll make it a green one using the secondary color, and I'll also give the round shape to the button. Inside this button, I want to have an icon. Let's keep the icon home, and along with the name, I'll pass in the slot and give it a value of icon-only. And as I save, you can see that I get a button that only has an icon. And the size of the icon in this case is slightly larger than on the other button. And that's because of the icon only value that we have passed in to the slot. And this is how you can put in icons inside your buttons. You can use icons pretty much anywhere in your application. Using them inside an Ion button is just an example. There are a lot of icons available and they are built into Ionic, and all you have to do is just pass in the name of the correct icon to get the desired icon. To find out the name of the available icons, head over to ionicons.com and you will get a large number of icons that Ionic has developed and made available for all developers in Ionic. You don't have to install anything. All these icons are shipped with Ionic, and all you have to do is just use the Ion icon component with the right value for the name. So now that we know how we can create inputs, buttons, and icons in our Ionic applications, let's learn how we can create lists and sliding lists in our Ionic applications.